land of rugged coastlines, land of ancient castles and traditions. A fine rain bathes ancient valleys. The sound of bagpipes echoes through the streets. The dark waters of the lochs reflect infinite skies. Welcome to Scotland. Welcome to a magical land. Known for its unique landscapes, this is a place where time flows to the rhythm of Atlantic tides. Where over 790 islands dot deep blue waters, and where Gaelic still resonates like an ancient song. But let's start from the beginning. Scotland stretches like a geological mosaic above England, divided into 3 distinct regions that tell the story of the Earth itself. The Northern Highlands guard ancient rocks of 3 billion years, witnesses to a primordial planet. While the Central Belt reveals the treasures of the underground with its coal and iron deposits that forge the industrial destiny of the nation. To the south, the southern uplands instead rise like gentle sedimentary hills in a landscape that seems painted with brushstrokes of emerald green. In this land, nature has sculpted 2 completely different coasts. The eastern one, gentle and welcoming with its sandy beaches that stretch toward the North Sea, and the western one, wild and jagged, where deep fjords carved by ancient glaciers bite the land like divine scars. Here, the climate itself reflects this geographical duality. While the west, caressed by the Atlantic current, wraps the islands in a humid and rainy embrace, the east offers drier and sunnier days, as if 2 different souls coexisted under the same sky. In this extraordinary landscape, furthermore, the population is 5.5 million inhabitants and concentrates mainly in the Central Belt, between Edinburgh and Glasgow, leaving the vast Highlands, which by the way represent about 2/3 of Scottish territory, to maintain the lowest population density in Europe, creating a silence that amplifies the voice of the wind and traditions. This low population density is also confirmed by the over 790 islands that dot Scottish waters, of which only about 90 are inhabited, but each one guards a distinct local culture. Skye, Mull, Arran, the Orkneys, and the Outer Hebrides are worlds unto themselves. Places where traditions still live in daily life, where Scottish Gaelic still resonates, keeping alive a fundamental part of Scottish cultural identity. Continuing, this nation guards 90% of the United Kingdom's fresh water, thanks to its over 30,000 lakes, called lochs, and which often reflect stormy skies and majestic mountains. Loch Lomond, for example, is the largest lake by surface area, while Loch Ness hides in its depths not only ancient legends, but also the largest volume of fresh water in the nation. And then there are the Scottish clans which still exist and have recognized chiefs. Each clan has its own tartan, and that is that distinctive pattern of the traditional kilt, which originally was born as a practical garment for Highland shepherds. It was a sort of enveloping blanket that allowed freedom of movement among the heather and could transform into nighttime shelter. Today, precisely the patterns on the kilt still tell stories of belonging and honor, while many castles remain still inhabited by the original families. Finally, Scottish whiskey, which is the precious Scotch, is not simply a beverage, but a true cultural art that expresses itself through different producing regions, each with its own distinctive character, from the peated notes of the Hebridean Islands to the delicate flavors of the lowlands. Scotland, therefore, is much more than a simple nation. It is an entire world, a place that continues to tell its ancient story to anyone who visits it or wants to discover it. But now, let's go discover the most incredible places of this land. Edinburgh. The Scottish capital is a city that strikes at first glance. Edinburgh rises on 7 volcanic hills, and every corner tells centuries of history. The center divides into 2 completely different parts: the medieval Old Town, with the castle that dominates from atop its rock, and the 18th century New Town, with straight and elegant streets that seem drawn with a ruler. The Royal Mile is the most famous street. It connects the castle, which seems to emerge directly from the rock, to Holyrood House Palace through a kilometer of cobblestones and history. Edinburgh's architecture tells 2 different eras. In the Old Town, the buildings rise up to 14 floors, true medieval skyscrapers, built in dark stone. In the New Town instead, Georgian houses of golden sandstone dominate, with their symmetrical facades and colored doors that create postcard-worthy views. But to truly understand Edinburgh, you must climb Arthur's Seat, the ancient volcano 251 meters high that watches over the capital. From its summit, you see the entire city spread below, with the North Sea shining on the horizon. This is perhaps the most beautiful view in Scotland. Isle of Skye.
With 20 hotel brands at IHG Hotels and Resorts, you can guess how you get.
Where Scotland meets the Atlantic, rises an island that seems to emerge from a Celtic dream. Skye, the largest of the Inner Hebrides, is a world unto itself, made of mountains that challenge the sky and coasts that shatter into 1,000 pieces against the waves. The wind seems to whisper ancient stories as you head toward Ness Point, the westernmost promontory of the island. Here, the land plunges into the ocean with a breathtaking drama. The White Lighthouse, solitary since 1909, watches over vertiginous cliffs where puffins and seagulls nest. There is also the Old Man of Storr, which rises with its rocky pinnacles that seem like giants' fingers pointed toward the sky. While in the fairy pools, crystalline waterfalls flow among the rocks, creating natural pools where, according to legend, the Highland fairies still bathe. Every valley hides ruined castles and lakes, where a perpetually changing sky is reflected. Skye is not just a place, it is an emotion that carves itself into memory forever. Loch Ness. In the depths of this 37-kilometer-long lake, something moves. Or at least so millions of people want to believe, who for decades have scanned its dark waters, hoping to glimpse Nessie, the world's most famous monster. But beyond the myth, this glacial lake in the Highlands hides a wild beauty that needs no legendary creatures to enchant. Its shores are embraced by pine forests, where the calls of red deer resonate, while ancient castles like Urquhart emerge from the morning mist, almost like ghosts. The lake, furthermore, contains more water than all English and Welsh lakes combined, and it is precisely this vastness, perhaps, that makes any mystery believable. The waters, in fact, reach 230 meters in depth, creating an underwater world still largely unexplored. But whether you believe in the monster Nessie or not, one thing is certain. Here, nature has created a spectacle that surpasses any fantasy. Here, every ripple of water can ignite the imagination and bring back childhood. Stirling. On a volcanic rock overlooking the plain stands the castle where Mary Stuart was born and lived, the most tragic queen in Scotland's history. Stirling has been called the key to Scotland because whoever controlled this city controlled the passage between the lowlands and the highlands. From the castle walls, the gaze embraces the battlefield of Bannockburn, where in 1314 the English were defeated, conquering Scottish independence. A short distance away, the ancient church of the Holy Rood witnesses centuries of history with its Gothic walls, while the surrounding cemetery guards the tombs of generations of Scots who served the crown. But it is another figure that dominates the horizon. And that is the 67-meter tower of the Wallace Monument, dedicated to William Wallace, the national hero who led Scottish resistance against English invasion in the 13th century. From the top, furthermore, the panorama extends to the first mountains of the Highlands. Stirling, therefore, is not just history, it is the symbol of Scotland's indomitable soul, where every stone cries freedom, but with the accent of generations of patriots. Glencoe. Imagine a valley where time seems to have stopped in the 13th century. Glencoe opens before you like a wound in the earth, carved by glaciers and bathed in the blood of history. Here in 1692, one of Scotland's most infamous massacres occurred. The Campbells treacherously slaughtered the MacDonalds who had hosted them, violating the sacred laws of Highland hospitality. But Glencoe is much more than a tragedy. Its mountains rise like guardians, with the Three Sisters, which are three enormous rocky peaks that dominate the valley. Every curve of the road reveals breathtaking panoramas, with waterfalls that plunge from vertical walls, heather that turns purple in summer, and lakes that reflect an ever-changing sky. And then when the mist descends from the peaks and envelops the valley, you understand why this place has inspired legends and nightmares. Glencoe is not just a destination, but an experience that leaves you with the awareness of having walked in history itself. St. Andrews. The salty scent of the ocean here mixes with the incense of Gothic ruins. St. Andrews is not just a picturesque university town overlooking the North Sea, but is the spiritual heart of Scotland, where Christianity and academic tradition have intertwined for centuries. The cathedral ruins, once Scotland's largest, rise against the sky. It was destroyed in 1559 by Protestant reformers, but its walls continue to tell stories of pilgrimages and faith. A few steps away, the University of St. Andrews, which is Scotland's oldest since 1413, hosts students who walk on cobblestones wearing traditional red gowns. But St. Andrews hides another secret. Here, in fact, golf was born.
With 20 hotel brands, at IHG Hotels and Resorts, you can guest how you guest. Unplug for the day. Or plunge into a long weekend at a Holiday Inn. Have your big moment, or enjoy every little detail at a Crowne Plaza hotel. Stick to the agenda, or experience something unexpected. With 20 hotel brands, at IHG Hotels and Resorts, you can guest how you guest. With 20 hotel brands, at IHG Hotels and Resorts, you can guest how you guest.
The Old Course, with its fairways shaped by sea wind, is the world's most famous golf course. Every golfer dreams of playing here, where it all began in the 15th century. William and Kate, for example, met right here, adding a touch of modern fairy tale to this timeless city. Fort William. At the feet of the giant of the British Highlands, which is Ben Nevis, Fort William welcomes you as a base for adventures that graze the sky. The giant Nevis, with its 1,345 meters, is the highest mountain in the United Kingdom. A colossus that can pass from Mediterranean climate at the base to Arctic climate at the summit, even in midsummer. The ascent requires 6 to 8 hours and a good dose of respect for a mountain that has already claimed victims. But whoever reaches the summit is rewarded with panoramas that extend to the Atlantic Islands. In Gaelic, it is called Poisonous Mountain, but it is a name that betrays the ancestral respect of the Highlanders for this capricious peak. A few kilometers away, furthermore, the Stial waterfalls plunge for 120 meters in a valley that seems to emerge directly from Lord of the Rings. Fort William, therefore, is not just a city, but the gateway to Europe's. Glasgow. Forget the gray and industrial image of Glasgow, because today it pulses with creative energy, like few cities in the world. In its streets resonate the chords of bands that made history, while colorful murals transform every corner of the city into an open-air art gallery. The majestic Gothic Cathedral of St. Mungo has dominated the city for almost 800 years. While nearby, the Victorian necropolis rises on a hill like a sort of city of the dead, with mausoleums and monuments that tell the glory of merchants of the era. But it is in the West End that Glasgow shows its most authentic face, with vintage markets, historic pubs, and the Gothic University of Glasgow, where Adam Smith studied. Finally, there is also the River Clyde, once the artery of the shipbuilding industry that built the Titanic, and which today reflects futuristic architectures. Glasgow is a city that has known how to reinvent itself without losing its working-class soul. Donan Castle. On a rocky islet where three lochs meet, rises Scotland's most photographed castle. Donan seems to float on the water, connected to the mainland by a stone bridge that appears and disappears with the tides. Built in the 13th century to defend against Viking raids, this manor has lived through sieges, betrayals, and destructions. In 1719, it was razed to the ground after hosting Spanish soldiers in revolt against the British government, and for 2 centuries it remained in ruins, until a lieutenant colonel of the McRae family rebuilt it stone by stone, following the original plans. The result is an architectural jewel that has served as backdrop for several films, although no director can compete with the natural spectacles that succeed each other here. In fact, there are northern lights visible from the towers, mists that wrap the castle like fairy mantles, and sunsets that set the loch on fire, transforming it into gold. Donan is true Scotland. That becomes poetry. Scotland. Land of misty islands. Land of rugged coastlines. Cairngorms National Park. Land of ancient castles and traditions. Imagine a wilderness as large as Luxembourg, where you can walk for days without meeting a living soul. The Cairngorms are the last bastion of wild Scotland, a subarctic plateau where creatures still live that elsewhere are only memories, like lynx, wildcats, and sea eagles. Four of Scotland's 5 highest mountains are found here, including Cairngorm valleys, which gives the park its name. These peaks, shaped by millennial glaciation, hide glacial cirques where snow resists until summer. There are also the ancient Caledonian pines, which are the survivors of the original Scottish forest and create natural habitats inhabited by red squirrels and deer. And it is precisely the fauna that makes this place unique. The reindeer, reintroduced in the 1950s, graze today on the highlands like in the times of the Ice Age. In moonless nights, furthermore, it is said that you can still hear the howl of ghost wolves, extinct now for centuries, but never forgotten by these mountains that guard the secrets of ancient Scotland. Glenfinnan Viaduct. "21 stone arches curve for 380 meters across a breathtaking valley. The Glenfinnan Viaduct is the jewel of the West Highland Line, one of the world's most spectacular railways that winds for 264 kilometers through the wildest Scottish highlands. This railway line, completed in 1901, represents a miracle of Victorian engineering that transformed an impassable territory into a corridor of unique beauty in the world. Its builders had to face peat bogs, mountains, and lakes, using only cement, sand, and local stones to create a structure that blends perfectly with the landscape.
With 20 hotel brands at IHG Hotels and Resorts, you can guest how you guest. Simply arrive or make an entrance at Intercontinental. With 20 hotel brands at IHG Hotels and Resorts, you can guest how you guest.
The Glenfinnan area, furthermore, is famous for the viaduct made famous by Harry Potter, where the cinematic Hogwarts Express passes, which offers passengers a marvelous spectacle that unites history and nature. In fact, under the arches, Loch stretches toward the horizon, while around the highlands draw majestic profiles that lose themselves in the mist of distant peaks. Outer Hebrides. Here, Europe ends and infinity begins. The Outer Hebrides are a chain of islands that float in the Atlantic, like stones forgotten by a giant. Lewis, Harris, and Uist are names that taste of wind and sea salt. These islands still speak Gaelic. In fact, in the small villages, road signs are written first in this ancient Celtic language, then in English. On these islands, furthermore, On Sunday, everything stops, because it is the Lord's Day in these Presbyterian communities among the most devout in Europe. And then there are the beaches that don't seem Scottish. Luscantire on the island of Harris flaunts white sand and turquoise water that would make the Caribbean envious. The difference lies only in the water temperature, which will quickly remind you where you really are. But it is at Callanish, on Lewis, that you truly understand the soul of these lands, with stone circles that emerge from the heather, older than Stonehenge and equally mysterious. Here, between Christian faith and pagan memory, the Hebrides show their true nature. Islands where the past never dies, but continues to live in the wind, that never stops blowing. Loch Lomond. A mirror of water that has made generations of Scots and travelers fall in love. Loch Lomond is Britain's largest lake by surface area, with 71 square kilometers of fresh water set between gentle hills and dramatic mountains. But its true magic lies in the 38 islands, scattered like confetti on its surface. Inchmurren, the largest island, hosts castle ruins and deer that swim from one shore to another, while in the waters live salmon and trout that always attract fishermen. The eastern shore is gentle and accessible, perfect for picnics and walks, while the western one becomes wild with mountains that dive directly into the water. The lake marks the border between the lowlands and the highlands. Therefore, passing through here means entering another Scotland, that of legends and clans. It is no coincidence that the Scots say that whoever has not seen Loch Lomond has not seen Scotland. Ness. Welcome to the capital of the Highlands. Inverness is the city where northern Scots come to shop, where tourists make their base to explore the mysteries of Loch Ness, and where ancient history and modern life mix effortlessly. The River Ness flows through the city center, creating an almost continental atmosphere. Along its banks you stroll, among gourmet restaurants and artisan shops. Inverness Castle, furthermore, built on a hill that dominates the city, is relatively young. In fact, it dates back to 1836, but rises on the site of a fortress that has seen centuries of Scottish history pass. From here, all the roads depart that lead to the islands, or to lost castles, or to battlefields where Scotland's destiny was decided. Inverness actually is not a destination, but a starting point. But it is undoubtedly also a place to stop, to breathe the Highland air and understand what it means to be Scottish in the 21st century. Isle of Mull. Mull welcomes with the scent of seaweed and the cry of seagulls. This Inner Hebrides island is a concentrate of wild Scotland, just 40 minutes by ferry from the mainland. Its jagged coasts hide secret bays, where gray seals sunbathe on the rocks. In the interior, instead, sea eagles with enormous wings glide over glacial lochs, searching for salmon. Tobermory, the main port, flaunts colorful houses that reflect in the water, and this spectacle has even inspired a children's series. But Mull guards an even more precious treasure, being the gateway to the island of Iona, where in 563 AD St. Columba founded a monastery that became the center of Celtic Christianity. Here, 48 kings of Scotland are buried. But the island's true wild side we find on its mountains, where red deer, wildcats, and martens live. That's why for nature lovers, Mull is a paradise.
Klaviyo brings you closer to your customers. The best global brands trust Klaviyo to get closer than a beauty buff to their favorite cleanser, a fresh new cap on the first tee, or a commuter to sweet silence. The AI-first CRM for B2C, Klaviyo gets you live in minutes, with unified data, marketing, service, and AI agents to plan, launch, and personalize. Get closer and grow faster with Klaviyo.
With 20 hotel brands at IHG Hotels and Resorts, you can guest how you guest. Simply arrive or make an entrance at Intercontinental Hotels. With 20 hotel brands at IHG Hotels and Resorts, you can guest how you guest. Simply arrive or make an entrance at Intercontinental.
Donator Castle. On a rock that defies the ocean from 50 meters high, rises one of the world's most spectacular castles. Donator seems to grow from the cliff itself, as if nature and man had collaborated to create something impossible. To reach it, you must descend a steep path that winds along the coast. Every step brings you closer to 1,400 years of Scottish history, where the Scottish crown jewels were hidden during Cromwell's invasion, or where William Wallace conquered one of his first victories. The castle is now a ruin, but what a ruin! Its walls merge with the rock, creating a breathtaking profile. Finally, on stormy days, Atlantic waves crash against the base of the cliff, sending spray up to the highest towers. Trossachs National Park. Where the lowlands region meets that of the highlands, opens a fairy world made of lakes and forests that seem to emerge from a Celtic fairy tale. The Trossachs are Scotland in miniature, everything you dream of seeing in Scotland, but concentrated in an area as large as Rome. Here, several water jewels succeed each other, among which there is Loch Lomond, which is the largest and most celebrated, all surrounded by woods that await only to be discovered. Furthermore, the mountains are not very high, but they have personality. Ben Venue, for example, means small mountain in Gaelic, but the view from its summit embraces a mosaic of lakes and valleys that makes you forget the fatigue of the climb. In the Trossachs, therefore, every trail tells a story, every loch hides a legend.